Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We've got a great crowd that's signed on this morning. As you probably know, the Chamber's mission supporting business and cultivating community has been done virtually for the last 3 months. And but to tell you the truth, when we've done advocacy or government relations seminars and webinars, we've had the best attendance. So people are very interested in what the plans are, and especially what you all are doing as elected officials. So the first thing this morning we'd like to do is Virginia Tech is our prime sponsor, and we have the president of Virginia Tech, Dr. Tim Sands, with us. So Dr. Sands, once again, we'd like to welcome you, and you are on.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Virginia Tech is honored to serve as the presenting sponsor for the Chamber's 2020 Public Policy Series. Like all of you, Virginia Tech is rapidly adapting to meet the challenges of COVID-19 across all communities we serve in the Commonwealth. Despite this disruption, I continue to be amazed by our students, faculty, staff, and alumni for their resilience, ingenuity, and acts of service over the last 4 months. Our plans for the Innovation Campus in Alexandria continue to move forward on schedule as the team works remotely. Together with our partners in the city of Alexandria, we really haven't missed a step. This past Saturday, the council approved and reviewed and our latest plans for the campus and surrounding innovation district and gave approval to keep the process moving forward, and we greatly appreciate their support. As we at Virginia Tech prepare to welcome students back to campus this fall, we recognize that many aspects of the college experience will need to change to keep our community safe. My team is working around the clock to make sure that we're prepared, and with the challenges comes an opportunity to reimagine, improve, and grow. I'm also proud to share that over the last 3 months, our team has been working closely with Dr. Hutchings and the Alexandria City Public Schools to lay the foundation for a partnership that will be a model for K-12 higher education partnerships in the Commonwealth. Focused on the priorities identified by ACPS, the partnership agreement was signed last week, and it includes career exploration activities, curriculum support, and creating STEM labs that provide hands-on engagement opportunities for elementary students, professional development and career pipeline opportunities for ACPS teachers, summer and after-school academic enrichment opportunities primarily geared toward middle school students, and enhanced pathways and resources to help students, particularly first-generation and minority students and families, attend and graduate from college. I'd like to thank Dr. Hutchings and his team at ACPS for all their hard work and commitment to this partnership. With the pandemic, while it's challenged our nation, we continue to see bright spots and messages of hope. Right here in Alexandria, we can all be proud of the tremendous financial generosity shown for Act for Alexandria's Spring to Action campaign and the Act Now COVID-19 Response Fund, both of which have raised a record-setting amount of support for our nonprofits and impacted members of our community. Alive has distributed over 100,000 pounds of food to families in need, and AEDP, in partnership with the city, is providing grants to accelerate the recovery and profitability of small businesses. I really have no doubt that we will emerge from this crisis stronger. Thank you to our elected leaders who have really had to make some unprecedented decisions over the past 4 months and have spent countless hours working to ensure the safety of all Alexandrians. I look forward to the day when we can meet again in person, but until then, please remember that Virginia Tech's mission is service, and we stand ready and willing to help. So thank you again, Joe and the Chamber, and look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Sands. And everyone is very excited about the Innovation Campus, and I know all the elected officials are involved. So thanks for all you've done and for your leadership and for David Baker's leadership. I do want to recognize our other sponsors. We couldn't do all of our Zoom without our sponsors. So Virginia Tech, Transurban, Dominion Energy, AT&T, Kinnaman Insurance, and Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. And now I'd like to ask the chairman of the Chamber Board, Dave Millard, to say a few words. David.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank all of the participants for joining today, and for Ann Harbor for her great leadership of this and stewardship of this event. But I also want to echo what Dr. Sands has already said, which is to thank Mayor Wilson and the entire city council, as well as Mark Jinks and the entire city staff for a creative and rapid response to really, I keep searching for a word other than unprecedented to describe what's occurred over the last 4 months, but until I think of a better one, I'm going to have to use that. But we appreciate, and on behalf of all the businesses that are members of the chamber and others, I want to thank you for your great efforts. So thank you again.
Thanks, David. Let me introduce a few folks that are with us this morning. Past elected officials: former Mayor Kerry Donnelly, former Mayor Allison Silverberg, and former City Councilman Frank Fannin. And then for the chamber, some of our past chairs who've chaired our board: Charlotte Hall is on with us, Old Town Business; Jen Kinnaman, Kinnaman Insurance; Elizabeth Moon, Focus Status Solutions; Kathy Puska, of course, Walsh Colucci; and John Renner, Renner and Company. More than half our board is also on this morning. And David Baker, we want to thank you for your leadership with Virginia Tech and to helping convince President Sands to be with us. We know how busy he is. For all of you, remember you can submit questions at any time by typing them into the chat box. Many of you have already sent us questions for the council. Now to get us going and to introduce Ann, I want to introduce Brent McKenzie, Government Relations and Community Outreach Manager at Transurban. Brent. Well, we know Brent is here. I saw his picture.
Yeah, Brent, I think you're on mute.
Right, I think I got it now. I hate being that guy, I apologize. Good morning, everyone. I do seem to be having some internet connection issues, so hopefully this comes through okay. Transurban's proud to be a sponsor of this event again this year. We've been sponsoring this event since our 395 Express Lanes project kicked off back in 2017. That project is coming to a conclusion here over the summer. And we're looking forward to the delivery of all the different aspects of that project. So much of it was more than just the conversion of the express lanes itself, which opened back in November to great success. It was a very smooth opening and no issues and challenges. We were very proud of how well it went. During those first few months of its opening, customers were seeing about a 38-minute time savings by using the express lanes versus the general purpose lanes. So there's a great opportunity for customers to save time off of their daily commute. In addition to the conversion of the express lanes, the project delivered a lot of other aspects for the Commonwealth, including improvements on the Pentagon reservation, where more than 3,400 carpoolers and sluggers drove through each day, and 1,800 buses. We also are contributing $15 million each year for transit improvements in the corridor. The first round of $15 million was paid to the Commonwealth back in November and has already been put into action. Alexandria received a couple of grants through that payment, improving bus service for the AT1 and the AT9. And then just a few weeks ago, we completed work on the 4th regular lane on 395 South between Duke Street and Netzel Road. Any of you guys who've ever driven 395 South, which I'm pretty sure that everybody on this call knows, there's that huge bottleneck there with that lane drop, and we were able to add a 4th regular lane there to get rid of that bottleneck and really help improve travel times. The estimates say that it'll improve travel times in that piece of the corridor by 50%, reduce accidents by almost 20%. So it's a really important improvement for the Alexandria area and for the Commonwealth as a whole. It's about a $475 million project. That $475 million has spurred over $1 billion in economic activity, and that economic activity has helped create more than 8,000 jobs in the region and in the Commonwealth. This has really been a model example of how a P3 project, the public-private partnership, could work. We really appreciate and want to thank the Alexandria City Council and their DOT staff for all their support and help throughout this project. They've done a really great job of helping us keep this project on time and on budget, and helping us keep the community informed of everything that's going on as well, which is always a big part of our job, making sure that those community impacts don't slow down our daily lives. And we appreciate all the help with that. with the city council and both with the chamber. You guys have been a big supporter as well. We appreciate it. The power of transportation to bring communities together and to connect people, to provide opportunities. It's something that Transurban truly believes in, and that's never felt more important than it does today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ann Harbour, the chairwoman of the Chamber's Government Relations Committee. Ann is the Director of Government Affairs and Local Engagement for Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield. Prior to joining Care First, Ann was Director of Government and Community Relations for Innova Health System. Ann is truly one of Alexandria's best, brightest, and busiest citizens. I don't know how she finds the time to do all the things that she does. She currently serves on several local boards and commissions, including the Board of Directors of the Center of Alexandria's Children, Chair of the Advisory Board of the Governor's Health Science Academy at T.C. Williams, Good Shepherd Housing Community and the Sorensen Institute Northern Virginia Regional Board. Ann was selected as a 40 Under 40 award recipient by the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce in 2016 and chaired the event the following year. Ann and her two children live in the west end of Alexandria, and all of us are looking forward to what's next for Ann. Ann?
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate that. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 virtual breakfast with the City Council. As Brent said, I have the pleasure of leading the Government Relations Committee for the Alexandria Chamber, where we have a diverse group of business leaders who come together to help inform our public policy positions and help us make Alexandria a great place to do business. Before we move too far into the agenda, I just want to make a quick note and recognize Councilwoman Pepper on her 35 years of service to City Council and to the city.
Thank you.
So nice to see that that council took some time out of your legislative agenda the other night to recognize you. So thank you, Councilwoman Pepper, for all that you do for our city.
Thank you.
Of course. And one other quick programming note for everyone. I know Vice Mayor Bennett Parker has had a last minute addition to her calendar with the VRE board. So she's going to be pulling double duty here and will need to step away around 9, I believe. So just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that as much time as our council members give to us for this event, they do still have quite a bit on their plate without us adding to their schedules. So with that, we'll just move right into our questions. We have kind of a list of our questions, and we'll go round robin with all the members of council, so everybody should have a chance to share a few thoughts on everything. And of course, we have to start our questions with the COVID-19 question. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic is unlike anything we've experienced in recent memory. As everyone tries to balance between protecting the health of Alexandrians and allowing businesses to open, what do you see as the top 3 priorities for City Council in the next 3 to 5 months? I'm going to start with Mayor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Ann, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and having all of us. And this is a very timely question at an important time for our city. So, you know, before we do anything, I think the predicate of any reopening effort is public health. You cannot restore the economy. You cannot really do anything until we have taken the measures necessary to protect public health. You know, I think if you look around the country and you see communities that have already proceeded with reopening, if they're not in a position to be able to have the kind of protections in their community, the community resiliency to prevent further spread of COVID-19, folks won't come back. You can open everything you want, folks won't come back until they feel comfortable. And so I think the first step that we have to do, the first building block we have to do is ensure that we have that community resiliency. I think that's what we've been very focused on, ensuring that we have the testing capacity in our community. We just went to the Department of Health with a new testing initiative, which has been approved and should be rolled out very shortly, focusing on the hardest impacted communities in our city, and that will help provide an early warning sign for a second wave in the future, which I think is going to be very important as we work to restore the economy. You know, going forward, once we have kind of gotten the public health piece sorted out, we have to go about the hard work of restoring our economy. This has been a body blow to nearly every sector in our economy, in our city, and we have a lot of work to do to help businesses get back to work. We are going to be in a couple days, I believe, awarding part of our CARES Act funds as part of our small business grant program, and working to help many of our small businesses transition and do the kind of investments they need to transition in this environment. We're also going to be working and continuing looking at some of the regulatory changes that we need to make to ensure that businesses can make this transition. We got a lot of work to do to just get folks back on their feet. But then I think we can't lose sight of the moving forward piece here. I think we have to keep part of our attention around, once we get past the emergency response, what do we need to do to benefit from this? I think this region did a very good job after 9/11 of figuring out how we benefited from the investments that were made in the aftermath of that tragedy. And I think we have to do the same thing in this moment. I think there are economic opportunities for us as a city and as a region, and we have to make sure that the investments that are made around public health that will be significant, both governmental and non-governmental investments. We have to make sure that Alexandria and this region is the place where those investments happen. I think that's how we can help grow our economy in the future, and I think those should be things that we're looking at while we're trying to fight the fire, which we need to continue to do for the next several months. So health, economic rebuilding, and then getting to a place where we can benefit economically. I think those are the priorities for now. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Bennett Parker.
Thank you. It's nice to join all of you this morning and nice to see your faces, even if it's virtual. So I think similar to what the mayor said, I would say through the end of the year, I think we're in a stabilization period. And so our priorities are public health, supporting businesses, and supporting residents. I think with respect to health, the mayor mentioned the partnership with the state and neighborhood health to expand testing amongst our hardest hit neighborhoods. I think we're currently second in the region per capita testing, but continuing to build on those partnerships to continue to increase that access. Similarly, I think the work that the city has been working with the health department and with Alive to provide food and supplies to our residents who need to isolate to make sure that they're able to isolate successfully and to not continue to spread transmission of the disease in our community. And again, providing hotel rooms where appropriate as well to help with those efforts is important to continue. In terms of supporting businesses, I think you saw the council within the first 10 days of the declaration, or about 10 days or 2 weeks, short period of time within the declaration of emergency, relax a number of regulations regarding businesses, parking, curbside delivery, and carry out restrictions, hours of operations, things like that. And I think to the extent, as well as some flexibility around certain tax payments, and to the extent that we're able to keep those regulations flexible or suspended through this process, I think is important, and to continue to listen to you all and hear what else we might be able to do. I think our SBDC and ADP folks have been crucial in helping businesses navigate the different federal legislation, stimulus programs that have come out, the wide array of Paycheck Protection Program and other emergency loans. And I think as I know some of those funds are open, but maybe closing soon, there may be another round continuing that work. Obviously the Back to Business grants that we did, if we get another round of CARES Act dollars, I think we would obviously do more of those. And then related to supporting residents, again, we did a lot of food and rental assistance and hope to be able to continue those efforts in the future as well.
Thank you. Councilman Chapman.
Sorry about this. There we go. So I think everybody's going to say the same thing. I think health safety is going to be our main issue. We don't want to continue flare-ups to happen in our community. We're seeing what's happening across the nation and other communities that have gone back without the necessary protocols in place. Again, especially since we're talking to the chamber, I think anybody's going to understand that we need to make sure that business, whether it's small, medium, or large, comes back strong. We need to do what we can around policy changes and dollars to help save those businesses that are struggling through this time. Because we know not every business model is made to handle a pandemic. Most business models aren't. And so we need to be doing everything we can, and continued conversation with business groups like the Chamber around those policy changes is what is going to help us work with business the best and most efficiently. The one thing that I don't think has been said yet is really getting our education system and our childcare systems back on track. We have a number of supervisors and employees that are going to need those systems to be functional and stable in a way that's going to allow them to know that their children are safe while they go back to work or work virtually. Before we started the call, someone was just, Dave, I think it was chatting about, we were chatting about what one of the local jurisdictions is going to be doing, because they just released their plans to the community for folks to talk about. And I think those conversations need to happen sooner than later for Alexandria as well. I did receive a couple calls from some folks in the childcare industry, because by and large, there hasn't really been a conversation about how childcare comes back and what that means, and if they have any type of outside support. And so those conversations need to happen, because we know that's going to undergird a number of our workers within the workforce. And so hopefully that bubbles up as a huge priority for council, at least to have a conversation about and have some community dialogue about as well.
Councilwoman Jackson.
Morning. Thank you for having us again. Always love seeing the faces of the chamber. So again, as you know, my colleagues have already mentioned, of course, public health is number one on the list. And of course, getting our economy back full force, and you know, housing and education and food, those are all, of course, major things that we need to always keep track of. To go back to our businesses, though, I know one of the great things that's come through with this is and we always did, it's just as a pandemic, you know, things are really highlighted, our strengths and our weaknesses. But our strengths have really been coming together in the partnership of Visit Alexandria and the marketing arm there of Alexandria City, and having the pledge of Alexandria's promise and the stickers in the windows to assure our citizens that, you know, the businesses and our community are coming together, and we're trying to do what's right and what's healthy, and having those stickers in the window saying we are a part of this community. We aren't just restaurants and business owners that don't live here, that don't care. They're taking the pledge too, to make sure that that everything is sanitized, that they're going through the procedures of wearing the mask, the sanitation, dealing with the health department, making sure all those things are on track, and that they want to get back to full force as well. We all do, you know, that I know we've discussed it before, the three legs of the stool, and, you know, childcare is one of them. So if you have the economy and housing and everything else that is getting back on track, but you don't have the childcare, that stool's going to be wobbly and will collapse under the weight of the others without having the kids go somewhere. So I know Fairfax County came out a couple of days ago ahead of us and said what their mission is, whether the kids want to go back to school in the classrooms, or whether they want to, the parents can choose whether classrooms or at home schooling again, so distance learning. And so ours will, I believe, will come out tomorrow, Friday. So I'm thinking that we're probably going to see about the same thing. We'll probably see a balance, but because of that, we already know teleworking works in a lot of industries, and so we want to continue those strengths, but also realize that we're going to need a lot of patience in the next 3 to 5 months. This is, you know, we're in this for the long haul, and we just want everyone to be safe and healthy and get through this, so we're all successful on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Councilman Aguirre is on the having a little bit of internet issues, but is on the phone, so we'll ask him to answer next.
And he's just rejoining now. He got kicked off and is coming right back on.
Okay.
But can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, it's asking me to punch a number in so that.
You want me to circle back so you can come back all the way in?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my internet. It's acting weird. But anyway, let me just get to it, and I'll worry about some of this stuff later. I can agree more with what I think the mayor hit it right on the head, right, and what my colleagues have already been agreeing with is that first and foremost, we have to take into consideration the safety and health of our residents and the employees for all our businesses, right? I think that's at the forefront of everybody's mind because like the mayor said, we can't really move forward if we don't have a healthy populace to be able to work in the first place. Personally, a couple of things that I've worked on during this crisis, a lot of times we have employees that don't have access to healthcare or they don't qualify for healthcare. So one of the things that I try to see implemented with the health department is a one-pager essentially showing folks that are underinsured or uninsured where they can go for care. One of the other things that I helped promote was hand hygiene stations. You guys might have seen them across the city. There is about 30 of them in 22 different locations. They're also mobile. So if we need to move them to a different location, we can do that. But basically, you know, I've made it a point to try and learn from other localities some of the best practices. And, you know, if they fit here in Alexandria. I was on a conference pretty much at the very beginning in March, late March, and we were able to hear from a council member from Seattle. And one of the things that they said was that they knew then what they know now is that they would have tried to implement these hand washing stations much sooner. So that's something that hopefully you've seen across the city. And also, I've started to see, at least in my office building, hand sanitizing dispensers have been put in place. And also, you know, decals on the floor to show social distancing, as well as infographics to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. And on the topic of infographics, I think the other thing that I've really been pushing is language access, because we have such a diverse workforce here in Northern Virginia. We have to be sure that we're communicating multiple languages, right? And I think part of that is not only using easy to understand language, but also infographics. And that's something that I've been banging the drum about since the very first meeting we had back on like March 18th. So I think we've created some very terrific pieces, and we've even created some short animated videos in different languages. My only concern is the timeliness in which we produce these items, because it's great that we have it, but it took us essentially 3 months to get this off the ground. So this is something that we needed in the first 2 to 3 weeks. Essentially what I'm saying is we can't repeat the same mistakes if and when we relapse to a second wave, or if things go back to having to clamp down. Hopefully that's not the case, but again, these are lessons learned, right? And taking it from a slightly different angle too, I think the other thing that we have to consider when we're coming back to business as usual is transportation, right? We have to make sure that people can not only get to work, but also that we can get folks to your businesses so that they can patronize them, right? Not to much fanfare, but I've come onto the board of WMATA. You know, I came on in March, right, when everything was kind of happening. So most people don't realize that I'm on the WMATA board now, but, you know, we're doing a lot of work at WMATA to help communicate what the bus and Metro Rail service is doing, requiring face coverings, rear boarding, heavy cleaning and disinfecting, trying to implement physical distancing when possible on the Metro Rail cars and the buses. Here locally, Dash has done the same thing, requiring face coverings, rear boarding, cleaning and disinfecting. So we have to make sure that when we're getting back to business as usual, that we're ensuring that transportation is being attended to, and that we're making sure that we're keeping that in focus as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Pepper.
Yes, well, at this point, there's not much new, but let me just say that, of course, I think the first thing is to keep our workers and residents well and healthy. I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that during the summer, we will have fewer and fewer cases, and people are going to be feeling very secure and perhaps not wanting to be as careful as they ought to. But but I believe that come the fall, there will be another wave, particularly by November, December, that sort of thing. Let us all pray that we have a virus, some kind of a shot or pill or something that will be able to help us out here. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that we must continue with following the data of incidences and following the advice of our scientists as to what it's healthy to do. And even during the summer, I would like people to continue to wearing their masks, and sanitizing their hands and washing their hands and keeping a social distance. You know, I'm really tickled by, I overlook a pedestrian path that is used pretty regularly now that the weather's a little better. And I notice that people are keeping a distance even as they pass each other. If they have to step away from the path, they do that. In fact, I have been really very pleased at how Alexandrians have been wearing their masks every place they go. In my condominium, we have a sign up that says that to wear a mask and that only 2 people at a time can be in an elevator because of the rules for social distancing. And these things are respected. I was kind of surprised by that, but it's terribly important. And of course, people that are over 60 or who have health issues should stay home. One of the things that I want us to really increase and really get it in place and value it, and I know we've done certain things that have been very important, but it's the tracing and the testing, or the testing and the tracings, that really should continue. And I know that we've had opportunities in the East and the West for folks to come and get the testing free. And I think that that is really one of the most wonderful things. We are going to have to be very careful, I think, not to get overconfident. But as we have childcare facilities opening, and as we have the schools opening, and they have found some rather clever ways about how you distance, and how possibly one of the things that are being considered is that in the case of the schools, they would have children who would come on Monday and Wednesday, and another set that would come on Tuesday and Thursday. That's just one of the possible ways of social distancing. But all of these things we've got to be working out very inventive and moving forward, because we must get people back on their jobs as early as possible to get this economy going. So the health of our residents and workers is a priority 1. Priority 2 is to do whatever it takes to open up our businesses and restaurants, data permitting, and to get our economy going. We don't want to see any closed offices or doors boarded up because they couldn't keep up with the rent and the payments to their workers. So let's do what is necessary. As I say, with the data of and the counts and incidences of the virus, assuming that it's a go, I think we need to do what we can. Now, my last thing is we've got to get our tourist trade back. Last year, the tourists that visited here, of course, spent some $859 million. That was a record breaking year, in spite of the fact that the metro stations were closed for a while because of what they were doing in terms of repairs to the platforms. So those are my 3 priorities. And I think that we're such a clever nation, a very clever community, that we can move through this. But if there's ever a lesson that we have learned, it is we must be prepared for something like this. So we're going to move forward, and fast, I hope.
Thank you. And close this question out with Councilman Seifelin. I think we have you on mute. I apologize. Let's see. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us, and thank you to your sponsors for continuing to work with you during these difficult times. So most things have been touched on by my colleagues of what council has done in the past, and I just want to re-highlight that the CARES money, the majority of it went back to businesses and rental assistance program. And I think that's credit to how well and financially strong the city was prior to the pandemic, that we were able to take this money and use it for those purposes. So those are really good things. But again, I always prioritize health and safety, and that's the health and safety of the residents, our employees, because at the end of the day, if we don't have the safety and health, we can have all the businesses open and no one would visit them. So I always put that first. So we've touched on what we've done in the past and how those are priorities. I think moving forward to recover from this, and this is something that I've always championed, and now that we're back to regular business, is making sure that we have more businesses coming to our town, the investments that the mayor has talked about. And if you recall, if you had the opportunity to watch the council public hearing this past Saturday, I made quite a big fuss about us not moving towards that direction in a speedily manner. There's been incremental changes, but I think the more businesses we're able to bring in through Alexandria Economic Development, with the help of Visit Alexandria and the existing businesses, the better it'll be for all the businesses in the city. The more visitors, the more likely you have people going to other businesses. So I made quite a big fuss about that, and then Carl from Planning and Zoning told us that he's working with Stephanie Landrum and Alexandria Economic Development to kind of come with a more robust plan and how we can do that. So looking forward to see what they have to bring, but I think the council on our part have to be more deliberate when we keep seeing repetitive businesses that are coming for approval and may not necessarily be the most robust in activating the other businesses around us. So we have to exercise better judgment. And I think if we have support and input from the chambers when these type of things come in, it'll be very helpful to make the city stronger business-wise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let everybody know, we're gonna change it up a little bit. We're gonna do 3 people per question, just so that we have a chance to have audience participation, and then just move things along, because I know we have a lot of questions from our chamber members that we want the council to have an opportunity to address. So the next question, we're going to start with Councilman Aguirre. The city has relaxed a fair number of regulations to allow businesses to operate under physical distancing protocol. Which of these loosened restrictions would you like to see become permanent? And are there any ones you would like to roll back?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Technology is always interesting this way, right? Especially when you're trying to play with the laptop and the phone at the same time. But I think the first one that comes to mind is definitely how we've been able to use the street and parking to provide additional spaces for restaurants to have outdoor seating, and especially with the physical distancing that we need to maintain. I think that has been something that I've liked seeing, and also I've had several businesses approach me and say, hey, is this something do you think we can continue to do afterwards? They've even proposed to me putting up some nice planters or something like that to create the division between the street and where the seating is. So I think that's something definitely to take into consideration. The other one that I'm kind of on the fence on is mixed drinks to go. I think definitely it's been extremely helpful for businesses. I have some concern around it, so I think I need to warm up to it a little bit more if we were to keep that going afterwards. But I think those are the two things that kind of come to mind immediately. And so we'll have to see about the mixed drink one. But I would like to.
If we can get one named for you, are you better with that? I mean, we have Justin's Rum Runner, so we just need to move.
Yeah,
in.
right.
We'll come up with something clever for you.
You just haven't had the right drink, Councilman Aguirre.
That's right.
Maybe I need a drink named after me first, and then maybe I'll come down a little faster.
I know my homework for today.
Those are the two things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Pepper.
Yeah, well, I guess great minds with a single thought. I would like to see the 100 block of King Street to continue to be used partly for restaurant seating. I think it sets a very festive stage. As I like to say, quoting others, it presents us as the fun side of the Potomac, which I love that image, and we are open for business. Having some auto traffic or truck traffic, I thought would be just awful, but it doesn't seem to bother. I thought it would be really an irritant, but it doesn't seem to annoy anybody, or at least I'm not hearing it. Maybe after this session, somebody will call me and say how awful it is. But I think that it just doesn't damper the merriment. And of course, I have to put a little plug in now. If only we had the economic development lights, otherwise known as the holiday lights, and if we had them lit, just think what that would do. That really says, as I have said earlier, we're open for business and we want you all to come. Anyway, I hope that we can continue that. I'd like to see even moving into the 200 block of King Street. So that's my 2 cents worth. So what would I like to roll back? Well, the free parking on Saturdays, I think, is certainly one of those things. And there are some other parking restrictions or regulations, regulation changes that we had. And what I would like to see is let's go back pretty much to the way things were. That's it.
Great, thank you. Councilman Seifeldine, your thoughts?
Well, thank you. So, I mean, there's been a lot of great things, and we're hearing good things from some of the business owners about some of the measures that council has taken that they'd like to keep. And, I'd like to see the numbers come back on those. I'll wait for staff. But I have supported when the mayor and Councilman Chapman brought the idea of making the Lower King Street as the plaza. And I have supported actually going all the way to 200 permanently. And mostly because I had the opportunity to live in Europe for about 6 months and saw how successful they were there. So I think it'd be successful here. And I think here was an opportunity for us to see that. We were going forward with the plan anyway, but that plan was a bit watered down based on what the businesses said. And we respect that, obviously. And having delivery to the business and the product that they need is important. But I think what we see now is a good measure that both things can happen. So I would love for the business community to kind of get on board with this. And I just think it would just be great for the city and the businesses as well. So I like to see that. I like to see some of the, the parking restrictions. I think they're good in the sense that more people feel comfortable frequenting more businesses. So if I come to downtown, if I have, free parking for an hour or two, then I'm kind of in a hurry to get my business done and leave, but I can leisurely stay around. I may have to put more businesses. So that's something I'd like to kind of consider keeping.
Thank you. We know the city's budget has been changed significantly due to COVID-19 responses. How difficult will it be to manage the financial cuts? And I'm going to start with Councilwoman Jackson on this one.
Okay. Well, actually, can I go back to the other one for just a minute, because I want to add something, and then I'm going to add to it. So I apologize for that. But something that came to mind while we were talking about what to keep indefinitely and what to roll back. The one thing that, and I know this really isn't a policy thing for us, but what was really happening, and I continue to watch, is and it's on your website, honestly, the Chamber's business updates, where everyone can put up what coupons or percents off, or you know, who's open, who's got curbside today, what are the business hours. Your website says a lot about what we need, and the Zebra actually has this curbside update also, that they've got like 8,000 members, I think, watching and discussing restaurants and where they've been and what specials there are and who's got what. And of course, to go back to the curbside, you know, drink pickup, that I know is a state thing. We'll see if we can continue with that. We'll have the mayor write another letter saying we want to keep that, and the governor will listen as he does. So there you go. But I'm sorry, I wanted to give my 2 cents on that. Now about the financial aspects here of our budget. You know, we are a resilient community, and we always have been. I think that we're in a tough spot, but I think we're in an okay spot right now. This is where we have to balance needs versus wants, right? Everyone's got a wish list, and we had a big one, and we you know, brought the General Assembly. We had a great turnover in that now we can get things done. The communication's there, and we've got the votes to get things done at the state and local level. And we still have that, but now we just have to be more conservative in how we're going to go about these things. I think that in the next, you know, 6 months, we'll see where we are. I don't think, you know, on the rebound here, we're going to have another year that's going to be tough to get through concerning our budget. And that's just me laying it out there. But I also think that there's a lot of promise in what's to come, and things will happen when they're supposed to. But I really think this is where we have to balance the needs versus wants of our community. And we just have to go, okay, what do we absolutely need? And, you know, hopefully the holiday lights and those things will stay, but we don't, you know, these are things that we have to look at and go, do we need that, or do we need more money for the rental relief program, or the housing, or the food, you know, for Alive, and to get people what they need, their shelter, their food, and continue with their health. So these are things that we have to weigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Chapman.
Thank you. I did want to get my 2 cents in on the last question, but just because it's
I know it's hard. I just want to make sure everybody has the time to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll spend 2 seconds. Quick thing. I think the biggest thing that I want to make sure we keep is flexible hours of operation. I think that it seems like such a simple thing that we can look to support our business community in doing. And so that's something I hope to have further discussion about. I will make it my homework to find name a drink for Councilman Aguirre so he can get on board with Mixed Drinks to Go, because I do think that allows a number of our bar businesses and restaurants to extend their products and services and gives them another lane of revenue. I will say for the budget, I think my overall thought with any cuts that we make and how socialize them with the community really depends on how we communicate. I think if we are very open and transparent about our communication about the effect that a lost service or a lost initiative, or you know, even something as sometimes complex as deferring projects and what the pros and cons of those will be, I think, to answer your question, I think that is how we manage any crisis of any level. It's really about communicating with the public, talking about what the trade-offs are as we cut things. One of the other areas where I think we need to have further discussion as a community, and particularly within our city government, is how we really deal with what I like to call third-party partners. These are the folks like Dash, these are folks like WMATA, folks like ACPS, and making sure they understand where we are financially and what our focus is going forward financially, and seeing how we can mirror and match those things up. What I don't want to see when we come back as we recover is a third-party partner not understanding where we are as a city and expecting us to make a huge investment in what they're doing going forward without any consideration of our standing and what our philosophy is as we recover. And I think that has the possibility to happen if we don't have clear communication with our third-party partners about our capability to pay some of the bills that we have, and then invest in the future. I think every organization wants to invest in the future and make sure they're moving forward, but we need to do that very, very smartly. That can't be something done that's just the full will of a third-party partner without really communicating that with the city and understanding where the city lies. And so I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. No offense to any of those third-party partners, but I think they need to understand where we're going to be coming from, whether it's ACPS, whether it's WMATA, whether our ability to one, handle our own governmental operations, but also kind of lay out the foundation for what the future looks like.
Thank you. And we'll close with Mayor Wilson on this question.
Thank you. I think first of all, we need to understand kind of what we're facing. The city saw about a $92 million hit on our revenues, and that's on an annualized budget that we were looking at in February that was proposed at $800 million. That's a degradation of revenues without precedent in the city's history. I mean, I was on council along with Dell during the worst of the Great Recession, and we saw a 2% reduction that year. This is orders of magnitude larger than that, and I think it's important to kind of recognize that. And we got lucky in some ways this year. It's hard to say that because our assessments were already booked. Our assessments were done by the time everything went downhill in March, and so all of the degradation we were dealing with was really from the consumption-based taxes, our dining tax, our sales tax, our BPOL, our transient lodging hotel tax. And so we were just dealing with that. Next year, we will be dealing with the impacts of this on our real estate market. And I think anecdotally, residential seems to be treading water right now, and we're doing all right. But commercial real estate is barring any dramatic changes here in the next several months, is going to take a really cataclysmic hit. And I think we have to be prepared for that. And the way we got through the current fiscal year changes and the next budget that starts in a couple days was by removing all salary adjustments, deferring a whole bunch of capital projects, which we definitely, and I personally do not want to be in the business of doing, and using judiciously some reserves. That is not going to be options we have available for us next year. And so next year we're going to be in a situation where if we see significant loss, we're going to be making headcount reductions in City Hall. We're going to have to be looking at program reductions. We're just not going to have the alternative. And so I think that's why our message to our federal partners, in every conversation I've had with both senators and Congressman Beyer, has been, they need to bring local government assistance to the table. The CARES Act was very helpful, but CARES Act only addresses new expenses. It only addresses things that are related to COVID that go forward. It does not replace revenue. The legislation that's been passed in the House of Representatives would address loss of revenue for local governments, but that's not really going to have a hearing on the Senate side. So I'm hopeful that the two bodies can come to an agreement on something that brings local government assistance, because barring that, we are going to be in a very, very significant challenge next year, where we're going to have to be making significant service reductions across the board. The state, basically the two levels of government that have to balance its budget, the state and the local government, cannot solve this problem. It is just too significant of a challenge, too much economic dislocation, that those two levels of government are not going to be able to resolve it. And so, barring federal assistance, we're in a situation where we're going to be making some very painful reductions. Now, I will tie it back together with the previous question. We do have the opportunity, I think, to help drive economic growth in a variety of different ways. I think as it relates to the challenge we're facing in commercial real estate, we need to accelerate a trend that we have been working on for the last several years, which is facilitating conversion of properties that do not have economic value in 2020, even prior to COVID. And now after COVID, definitely do not have an economic value, into more usable uses. And so I think we have a role to play on the city side to help ease that transition and add flexibility and optionality to our zoning code. And so I'm hopeful that we will accelerate our efforts to do that. I think that's something that's in our work plan and stuff we can do and make accomplishments on. I think we cannot sugarcoat the environment that we're facing here. It is a significant one. You're starting to see now communities, some of the larger cities, talk about some of the major impacts that are going to be facing a lot of very larger cities, and that's going to trickle down. So we have some very difficult decisions ahead of us.
Great, thank you. I know there's a few comments in the chat around equity, and I want to thank everyone for teeing that up. That's actually our next question that we'd like to talk about. With the broader conversations around equity in response to COVID-19, as well as racial justice throughout the country, we want your advice on how stakeholders in Alexandria can work towards a more inclusive community. The Chamber has committed to rolling equity throughout our legislative agenda this year, be it in reducing barriers to access for all types of businesses and our community members individually. But what are you all hearing from your constituents that the Chamber membership needs to hear so that we can push back out information to our members to advance inclusive policies and initiatives? And I'll start with Councilman Chapman. I'm going to actually open this question up to everyone because I think, we need to make sure that everybody's having, a chance to really delve into this. It's an incredibly timely and important topic that we should be moving the needle on. So Councilman Chapman.
Sure, and I'll take this in two parts. I think there is a equity piece around COVID-19 and health disparities, and having further discussion about how we close those health disparities in terms of a preventive matter, but also support, let me say this the right way, to support the systems we have now that need to be able to answer and solve some of the issues for those who have the disparities in the communities that have them. I think we've seen some of that. We have a number of nonprofits in the city that have been working to fill those gaps and provide those support services. There is going to be a broader discussion on where do we go from here? How do we make up that equity piece, especially as it relates to health? And so I think that, that's one separate piece. Of course, that doesn't solve all the problems for a number of our communities. But as we've seen with this pandemic, a health emergency like this can have a devastating impact on communities that have fallen behind, whether it's socially, whether it's economically, and especially as it relates to health and health access. Separately with kind of racial justice, I think that is actually a whole separate kind of conversation in and of itself. I think the mayor has been on record in saying, the city has had its historical challenges and systemic issues. I don't think, and there's actually an op-ed I was reading in the local paper where somebody's kind of challenging that. If you are a historian or you read through the city's history, you understand that that is indeed the case. And so, our generations, whether you're younger or older, whatever, we have the responsibility to sort those out, call them out, and then try to change them. I think this has become a spotlight issue due to what we've seen nationally. But I think all of us on this call know some of the issues that have systemically held back certain parts of our community. I think it should be a case where communities don't have to side between one group of people or the other, but I do think we do know that there are policy changes that need to take place in certain parts of our community, parts of our government, parts of our third-party partners that can start to solve some of those issues. I say that overlay in order to kind of hone in on what the chamber can do. I think chamber needs to continue to help those, whether it's women-owned, minority-owned businesses, gain some opportunities in the market. The marketplace is never going to automatically allow those voices to necessarily gain their own voice because of systemic problems we've had decades, years past. But in terms of, for a number of our small minority women-owned businesses, one of their biggest pieces is trying to figure out where they go and how they market to customers, how to cater. And I think marketing dollars is a huge issue for small businesses. How do you get those marketing dollars? How do you use those marketing dollars? And how effective those marketing dollars can be. So whatever the chamber can do to help market, I'll take Visit Alexandria as an example. They've been hugely supportive of my business because they have an in with that industry, because they have a bigger, frankly, pot of money to connect with businesses, because they have better connections. They've been able to just connect my business as a minority-owned business with marketing opportunities. And so I know, obviously I don't know every business that's within the chamber, but I would say for a huge majority of them, marketing dollars is going to be some of their best used money. And so whatever connections the chamber has to kind of employ strategies to help, particularly those businesses that are small and women minority owned, kind of get a leg up when it comes to marketing, the better they can do. I think within the chamber itself, every organization right now is kind of checking themselves as it relates to diversity and the ability to have voice within certain communities within their organization. I think the chamber would be kind of right and smart to continue to do that checkup and make sure you have individuals at the table that have different perspectives, come from a different background. I would say those things to begin with. Can't hear you.
See, now it's my turn to mute myself. I know a lot of people were looking forward to me not talking anymore. Councilwoman Pepper, present the question.
I took it in a different way because I kind of knew that everybody else was going to be talking as has already begun. Anyway, I took it in a cultural change is what is needed, period. And since this is the chamber, I'm beginning with business owners. I think it begins with self-reflection, and that you really need to listen to people such as John, and listen and with the idea of learning. One of the questions that business owners need to ask themselves in the context of equity and racial justice, they need, as they are reflecting, they should be asking themselves, who am I hiring? What communities am I marketing to? What vendors do I choose? And do I really treat customers equally? It isn't accusing anybody. I'm just saying that I think all of us throughout the community, business owners or not, this is where it begins, is this understanding and reflecting on wherever we are. You know, this topic reminded me of something that Vola Lawson used to say, and that is we have zero tolerance, that's what she would say, for any discrimination. And if you see any, say something and do something. Own it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Thank you. You know, this is obviously not a new discussion for our city and for our community. You know, this is a conversation that is 400 years plus in the making for our community, but it's certainly one that I think the national moment that we're involved in has forced our attention to again. And you know, I think as Councilman Chapman mentioned, you know, we have you know 350 years plus of de jure racism that was essentially hardwired into our economy, and we have spent the last several decades trying to undo that, and the work certainly continues. You know, we had a joint meeting. It feels like 18 years ago, but I believe it was just before COVID got going with our friends in Arlington County. And a big focus of that meeting was to define a way to ensure that some of the growth that is coming to this region, and we were fortunate to have Dr. Sands speaking to us earlier as part of the Virginia Tech investment, which we have land use approvals on Saturday. But part of that was to ensure that that growth is one that benefits all in our community as an inclusive growth as we go forward. And I think, you know, our focus has to be, as Councilman Chapman noted, not only do we identify those disparities where they are in our community, but prevent exacerbating them. And, you know, and I think that's the work that we have immediate. You know, COVID has shined a light on not only the public health disparities, but some of the economic disparities. You know, if you look at how the PPP dollars were handed out around our country, you'll see that unfortunately minority-owned immigrant businesses were not able to access those funds in large part. And a big part of that is not because you had bankers that were sitting there and discriminating against those businesses, but because we have unequal access to finance and banking relationships in this community. And I think one of our focuses, and I see Stephanie Landrum on my screen here, but one of our focuses as we have handed out our CARES Act money to small businesses has been making sure that that we provide capital for our minority-owned and immigrant businesses to try to ease some of those disparities and help those businesses back on their feet, so that this moment that we're in doesn't kill off more of those businesses than others. But I think we have a responsibility. I think businesses have a responsibility to help be a part of this as well. And I've seen a good many Alexandria businesses during this moment who have stepped up to identify the ways that they will, going forward, try to ease economic disparities in our community. And we need that partnership, and we're going to need to continue that going forward. I think everyone has a role to play in ensuring justice in our community. And so this is important work. It's work that we will do our part on the city side, but it's going to require an all of community effort to address these disparities.
Absolutely, thank you. Councilman Aguirre.
Thank you. You know, I agree with a lot of the sentiments and the comments of my colleagues. There's, I think, first of all, like Councilman Chapman said, highlighting a lot of the inequities that we've been seeing because of COVID. We really have to start to address those. And I think that this council has really made a lot of efforts, even before COVID happened, right? We hired our first race and equity officer. We're doing a reassessment of language access. We're doing a reassessment of our procurement process. So I think in that sense, we've started to go down that road, but there's still a lot of work to be done. From Councilwoman Pepper's perspective, I agree. I think there needs to be some inflection, right? What is the composition of our boards? What are our hiring practices? What are our promoting practices, right? I think that is something that a lot of times we forget about, because we might have really good hiring practices, but for whatever reason, at times we might let that kind of slip by our mind in terms of promotions. I think of my own company where I work, where we're predominantly women and minorities at the entry and other positions, but then when it comes to middle management and leadership, it's almost exclusively white men, right? So I think that is something that we really have to take into consideration when we're talking about promotions, and I think the city has to be inflexive about that as well. The other thing that has been brought up, and I think the mayor really helped to highlight this one, is proper outreach to minority businesses, right? To small women and minority-owned businesses, immigrant-owned businesses, because there's that national narrative of banks not being able to support a lot of these businesses when it came to the PPP. And again, like the mayor said, we made it a point to not only identify and reach out to these minority-owned businesses here in the city with our own Back to Business grants, but also to make sure that they are applying and providing them the support that they need so that they can actually have a successful application. So I think that's really important. You know, this is all about accountability, and I think the last two things that kind of come to mind are making sure that we're creating safe spaces. Again, going back to my company, we've had a series of webinars and conference calls where we've had upwards of 1,000 people on these webinars, so that we can discuss the issues that have been going on, and so people have a place to be able to let some of the emotion out, let some of the feelings out. And it's also brought up a lot of times where employees have felt either discriminated against or having to deal with microaggressions in the workplace. So I think that's something that we have to be very cognizant of, and also when these things are brought up, that they should not just be dismissed, right? You shouldn't just be, oh, you'll get over it, right? It's like, no, let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's flesh this out. How can we support? What are things that we could change? Those types of things. So I think that's important to take into consideration.
Thank you. And then Councilwoman Jackson.
Well, as has been touched on by all my colleagues, there's a few things here, and to really just go on what Councilman Aguirre was just saying, you know, communication goes a long way, and everyone has to have those tough conversations in their businesses, in our community. You know, Black Lives Matter, the protests that have been going on. It's also Pride Month. So we are an inclusive city, or at least I always felt that way. But we're also, as a council, as a community, open to any suggestions. And I know we've gotten a lot of emails pouring in about what can we do, or we'd like you to see you do some of the other things. But to get back to businesses and how they can help, you know, the city, you have government that has some structure to it about the equity supposedly is there, and everyone gets the same across the board, kind of like teachers and their salaries, right? You have pay raises, you have step increases, and they're not really based on merit as opposed to based on time spent in that job. But businesses, private businesses are a little different, right? So they can have different benefits packages that might be able to help with those disparities that are with our health care, our child care, the economy, the housing. If there was a little bit more of a promotional packages of benefits that businesses could offer, and also just the public-private partnerships that could could help sustain and maintain those type of to level off the playing field. But we do have a long way to go. We have those cultural aspects that, of course, have been here for hundreds of years. And there's no denying that history, but you have to learn from it. And of course, one of the things that I wrote when, concerning what happened with George Floyd and all the other, just awful traumatic things that have happened recently, and that we, media takes it around the world in 2 seconds, which is beneficial and yet traumatic, even more traumatic for a lot of people, especially young people, and they're not in school. So we have to be the role models for the next generation. You can't just say implement this, but then not teach the younger generation what they should, what they should expect, what they should do, who they should be, how they should treat others. And from there, it will hopefully instill in our community, but it's going to take a lot of time. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's like, the Titanic couldn't turn on a dime to get away from that iceberg. Here we are. This is part of it. This is systemic, and we have to start teaching the kids now. Be kind. Treat everyone equally. You are no better. This is, everybody supports everybody else. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to harken back to something that Councilman Gure said. I appreciate when you talk about looking at the composition of our boards. One of the things that I'd hope that council can talk with our legislative director about, or the state delegation as well, is, the equity issue about our boards and commissions. Having meetings at 5:30, 6, 7 o'clock at night really does pose a tremendous barrier for some of our community to access those boards and commissions. As a single mother myself, it's sometimes hard for me to be everywhere that I want to be for both my family and for my city. And if there's a opportunity for the Commonwealth to look at more loosening of the restrictions that we've seen during COVID of access to Zoom platforms, so that we can really have the sole proprietors who are in the West End who want to share their experiences but may not be able to leave their business at 6 o'clock, engage on a board and commission. Those are those opportunities when we look at equity to think outside of the box of what barriers exist to the current framework. And I hope council will be amenable to considering some of those broader changes that may need to happen. We have one final question from the chamber staff, and I'm going to being cognizant of time, I'm going to ask Mayor Wilson to answer this question real quick, if you all don't mind. Certainly flag me down if you'd like to add something. But Mayor Wilson, can you give us a quick update on the status of some of the city's most important projects? It's Potomac Yard, Virginia Tech Innovation Campus, and Landmark Mall.
Yeah, so on Potomac Yard Metro, construction is underway and continuing. We did finalize with the contractor the change order to enhance the southwest access to the station. So that's supplying the $50 million that the state had provided as part of the Amazon effort to improve access to the southwest, where we had originally removed the southern mezzanine. And so that's now being finalized with the contractor, but we have an agreement on terms, and so that's underway. Construction continues. It has been minimally affected by by COVID, and so we'll get a better assessment over the next couple of weeks and months as to what schedule impact that will have, but it shouldn't be dramatic, which is good. And so we're still looking at a early 22 opening on the station. As far as Virginia Tech, we just approved a whole series of land use changes for the first portion of the build out in the northeast corner of Potomac Yard. We approved that on Saturday. We still have additional land use approvals to come as the DSUPs come in for individual buildings, but really an exciting framework for how that campus is going to help catalyze a whole bunch of Potomac Yard happening in the very short term. And so we're very excited about that. As far as a Landmark, an extremely active conversation over these last several weeks and months. I can say at this point that, obviously, has been published reports have talked about how Hughes is assessing their overall portfolio and what they own and what they want to own. They had published a list of what they were getting rid of and what they were keeping, and Landmark was on neither list because that would be too easy. And so it does appear that they will not proceed with redevelopment of this property. And so we're waiting for them to sort that out and make a decision about their ownership of the property. I think our interest is having a partner that is prepared to move ahead with redevelopment. The city is prepared to do the things that we need to do from a land use perspective and potentially from a financial partnership perspective to ensure redevelopment of that site occurs. I feel more optimistic than I have ever felt about Landmark moving ahead, but we still have a lot of work to do to get there. So very, very active conversation, multiple conversations per week happening right now. I can't hear you, Ann, if you're talking.
And I'm done. Sorry, guys.
It's all good.
I was like, this is the first of 17 meetings I have today.
Oh, only.
Insight into my family life. I talk to myself a lot and nobody else listens. So welcome to my home life. So I have one audience question I'd like to start with is what can be done to help older adults and those with disabilities access businesses on Lower King Street now that it's closed to vehicular traffic? If you just want to kind of wave your hand if somebody wants to take that one first. We won't necessarily go council member by council member on these questions.
I'm happy to take it if nobody else wants to take it.
Go ahead.
John, you want to go on this one?
Sure. I think that was the big sticking point for when we talked about 100 King Street, regardless of COVID and outdoor dining. A number of business owners, including some of those on the call, we're interested in talking about that specifically because we want to make sure these restaurants are still everyone. And so I know there was another concept that had floated up kind of to the top for what the 100 block of King Street could look like that would allow some vehicular traffic specifically to address that issue. I think with what we've done during COVID, obviously that's much different, but as we start to hopefully evolve the idea of 100 King having a little bit more outdoor dining, we can look at that as an opportunity because I think that is probably one of the mainly only ways that we really solve that issue to really allow those that have mobility issues to be able to access as easily as possible some of the restaurants on that block. But I think that's still the sticking point that needs to be sorted out.
Thank you. I know Maria's been collecting all the questions that have come over the course of the morning. So I'm going to throw it back to Maria for a few minutes so that you all can hear some answers to your questions.
Thanks, Anne. So I've gone through the chat and we have time for about one or two questions from that. First of all, there are many fans of Mixed Drinks to Go in there, and I'm pretty sure plans for Canix Drink have been are underway, and it's going to be created very soon thanks to this call.
Already done. It's already done. I've gotten word it's already done.
Great.
Canix curbside cocktail will be available at O'Connell's very soon.
So we get a lot of things done at our meeting.
Everybody go to O'Connell's for lunch. That's, I think.
Yes. There are also lots of positive comments here on the closure of 100 King. Some advocating also for the closure of 200 King. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward, Council. We have a question on digital equity. What are your thoughts on making sure students and families have access to internet and hardware to participate in distance learning, telework, telehealth, etc.?
I'll take some of it.
All right, go ahead, Councilwoman Jackson.
Okay, so a few things about that I know I've thought about with the closure of school. I know ACPS gave out Chromebooks. They were only for 3rd through 5th grade for elementary and then further up. So they've been able to check those out. I don't believe they had to give them back because of course there's mandatory school starting July 6th through the end of July that parents can opt out of. But we're trying to continue on the learning curve there to make sure the achievement gap is not as huge as it might be overall. In terms of also, so any child that's basically second grade and under, you had to have your own parents have Chromebooks or their iPad, iPhone, computer. So I know in my household it's been a little interesting, and of course we're blessed that I was able to purchase our own so that they could get on for the last 3 months and have that communication with their teachers for social distancing and social learning. I know our libraries that have just have been able to help, I think, a lot. And unfortunately, Vice Mayor Bennett Parker is not on the call anymore, but I know she's a board member for the library and has been very involved in some of the technology aspects of that. Also, I think that that just in terms of our businesses, I know it's always been interesting to go into one restaurant and not have that Wi-Fi available, and then you have to go outside in the street. So we might want to think about making that more available as we get online to some 5G and try to make it again more equitable. But this is where you know, I think the school system plays a large part in helping get our kids online, especially when that's how everybody is doing school right now. So I'm sure somebody else will weigh in.
And
Go ahead, Jen.
oh, sorry, Maria. Thank you.
Okay.
So keep going back and forth. So I think one of the opportunities to have discussion is with some of our partners that really kind of control this area. I know Fairfax County has had conversations with Comcast and Cox Communication, and I think it serves us our best interest to have those discussions. I know that ACPS is having or has had those discussions with Comcast about support in a digital space, especially as they move forward. And I think as the city continues kind of down this path, I think we're going to rely on our communications utilities a lot more. And so having further discussions about how they can support virtual schools and the virtual need that we'll have is something that we're going to have to do. And I think that's really the way we start to bridge that gap, because it's not just a kind of individual family by family issue. It's a systematic stance that we need to take with this. You know, our utility partners know that there are communities or parts of our community that can readily afford certain tools, and they know there are other parts of the community that can't afford those tools. I think that's why we've seen Comcast roll out with their Essentials program and try to expand that during the pandemic, because they know there are individuals that have to have that access, whether they can really afford it or not. The need is there, and so hopefully with continued conversation with our utility partners, we can make that a long-term structural change.
If I could just add really quickly too, I think the communication part's really crucial from the schools going to the families, because when you have an immigrant family that might be have issues with English proficiency, I mean, it just really magnifies the inequities, right? Because it makes it extremely difficult. They might have the technology barrier, and then you're trying to explain to them in English how to use it. So we have to make sure that we're providing the proper communication as well, so that once the families are given that technology, that they can actually be able to use it, right? So I think that's a key component that sometimes we forget about and that we have to make sure that we're considering.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you all. We are at time right now, but I do want to ask one more quick question, because we got it a couple times, and then we will wrap it up. What is the likelihood of Alexandria offering financial support for sole proprietor businesses with independent contractors?
So let me take that one. We spent, the city is expecting to receive a total of about $28 million of CARES Act dollars. We received the first tranche of that, which was 13.9. And that's what we've used for the emergency rent assistance, the small business assistance, food assistance, and the city's expenses. We are working with the governor's office and folks in Richmond to get that second tranche allocated as quickly as possible. When we have that second tranche, presumably we will have second phases of all of those, many of those programs, and we will have a second phase of the small business assistance. And we are going to look at some of the businesses that were not a part of that first phase to be able to benefit from a potential second phase. So no assurances yet until we receive second phase money, and we're working. Obviously, if you have contacts in Richmond, please tell them to make sure that local governments get their second tranche as soon as possible. And that they be handed out per capita, by the way. We also would encourage that messaging. And once we have those resources, we'll put them to work. I think the city has done really an incredible job of getting that money out to the community very, very quickly. And our message to the federal government is, and our state government is, send us money, we'll put it to good work in helping our residents and our small businesses. And that's one of the ways we'll do it.
Sounded like a homework assignment to the few of us who are spending a bulk of our time in Richmond too.
If you're stuck in an elevator with the governor, let him know. Thank you.
Stuck in the elevator with anybody, I'm going to have a panic attack.
That's right.
Well, I just want to thank everyone this morning, members and members of council, for joining us this morning. I know everybody has pulled in a tremendous, in many, many different directions, and it's always very gratifying to see so many people want to hear from our council members and all of your thoughtful responses. So on behalf of the board of directors of the Alexandria Chamber and our membership, thank you all, members of council and Mr. Mayor. And I hope everyone has a great day. And until next time, we'll do this all again very soon. Take care.